which ironically is fairly close to where I park. So, but my guess is that is probably where they'll be set up. That is where they've been set up recently. And that is not the only place they've used to set up for game day, but they probably will. I don't think the university wants them on North Campus. That'd be kind of a cool place to do it, but I think they treat that ground around North Campus as fairly sacrosanct, so I'm guessing they won't do that there. A couple of more before we get ready to rock and roll with the big show. Chase Barbie says they'll go into the stadium for the picks like they did last week. Yeah, I guess they did do that last week. I was not watching the show, but I did hear that. And obviously, you'll have to let Herb Street, get on over there and be in the stadium in time for all of that. Jermaine King says, if we want to be elite fans, we need to believe in the team and believe that we'll be eating pork chops all day long on Saturday. Yeah, listen, I love a good team-centric tailgate. A lot of folks going to be getting that barbecue pork and going in a whole, a lot of folks going to be smoking a whole hog, probably getting ready for this one on Saturday for sure. Or maybe it's one of those things where and I'll say this, we'll start the regular show. So the noon kicks always remind me of this, and I'm always, I dislike having to give too much credit to an SEC foe here. But one of the great things that LSU does is if you ever go to see a game in Baton Rouge, their fans tailgate very hard after the game. Whereas for the most part, most SEC schools, once the game's over, people are packing up to go home. At LSU, and you can see this, you go to the game, there's obviously a big tailgate atmosphere before the game, and then the game's over, folks come back, and they just set the tailgates back up, and they just get right back after it again. I mean, I'll give LSU a ton of credit for doing that. This is one of those things that on Saturday you wonder if Georgia fans could kind of do the same thing of, yeah, you got to kind of, get to Athens early just to kind of get into the stadium in time. But after the game, there's no rule that says you can't put the tent back up, put the chairs back out, fire up the TV, watch some 3:30 games, and head into the night there and that tailgate there in Athens. At least I don't think there's any parking lot rules that prohibit that. So, no reason why you couldn't have a little post-game tailgate, hopefully with a little bit of a celebratory mood. Maybe that's the way it goes down on Saturday. We'll have to see. All right, here is what's coming up on today's show. John Stinchcomb stops by. We'll get an insider update from Classic City Logger with him. We will look at a couple of the other games around the SEC here this weekend. We'll talk more about the way in which Georgia's utilizing playmakers such as Brock Bowers. That's before the show is done. We'll let you hear the direct challenge from Kirby Smart to all of you about making Saturday as big a deal in Athens as it needs to feel like, noon game and noon start notwithstanding. But we'll begin this way. Pretty interesting anecdote from Sam Pittman about his old boss, Kirby Smart, that I think sets the stage for the unique relationship these two coaches have with each other going into Saturday's game. But more importantly, it also tells us right now why Georgia is seemingly avoiding a plague that's affecting a lot of the rest of college football. I'll tell you more about it as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Georgia dismantled Vanderbilt on Saturday. We'll get to that some here today, but you sort of get the sense the mood around DawgNation is already looking ahead. Looking ahead to this Saturday's game back in Athens against Arkansas, a head coach on the one side you know very well, and a team that he coaches, the Razorbacks, that are much better at this point in the season than almost anybody could have predicted. It sets up for a very fun day in Athens on Saturday. And I want to begin the show today by looking at these two coaches. They do know each other exceptionally well. Kirby Smart made Sam Pittman the centerpiece, really, of his first coaching staff when he first got the job in time for the 2016 season. And Pittman, seemingly on the other side of this, has great affection for Kirby Smart there as well. In fact, Pittman told a pretty interesting story about Smart last week when he made an appearance on the very popular podcast, Pardon My Take, the Barstool deal with PFT commenter and Big Cat. Well, Sam Pittman was on that show, and in the midst of PFT asking him something about, I guess the fact that he has so many centers on his roster, he relates an anecdote about Kirby Smart. Now, I'm going to play you this for two reasons. First of all, it's just kind of cool to hear the one coach talking about the other coach before they play each other coming up on Saturday. But more importantly than that, I'm going to use this to build off of something that Kirby Smart is clearly succeeding in right now that a lot of the other great coaches in college football are currently not succeeding at. And Pittman's words will kick all of this off for us. So here he is from Pardon My Take on what he learned from Kirby Smart.
I read that you have 6 centers on your team this year. Is that still true? You still got 6 of them?
Still have 6. There's 2 people that handle that ball every snap, and that's the center and the quarterback. On Saturday mornings we have our meetings, and I know Cody gets mad at me, but I'll go, okay, what happens if he goes down? Okay, what happened? We'll get to the 5th center, 6th center, the 5th left tackle. And to be honest with you, Kirby Smart used to do that to me when I was coaching over at Georgia too, and I was going, damn, he thinks we're going to get to the 100th left tackle. But to be honest with you, last week we got hurt, we got beat up, and one kid played 3 different positions.
I love that story of Pittman about Kirby Smart. The Cody that he references there is his offensive line coach at Arkansas, who was a former graduate assistant at UGA. But Pittman says, listen, I'm grilling my assistant saying, okay, if this guy goes down, who plays? And if this guy goes down, who plays? And on you go to the finally you're talking about like your 5th and 6th string option in one of these games at that moment. If you have to move guys around, how are you shifting them around? All the potential scenarios. And Pittman says the reason why I do that is because that's what Kirby Smart once did for me. And the reason why I think that is really good is because I think it reinforces that something that Smart kind of talks about all the time, that frankly, those of us who get used to hearing this in press conferences and hearing Smart say these kinds of things, I think after a while our eyes just kind of gloss over. We almost kind of get bored by this notion of, oh, I'm going to be obsessive over small details, and I'm going to fixate on every possible thing that could happen in a game, and I'm going to show you how much of a football guy, how much of a coach I really am. And to a certain point, we kind of tune that out for a while because it seems like just an excessive degree of, I don't know if you call it coach speak or what, but it seems so over the top in terms of I've got to be obsessive about every detail that you wonder, could any human being truly be that obsessed with small details? And Sam Pittman, who would know, says, yes, I am now treating my assistants the same way Kirby Smart treated me, which is obsessing over every possible detail you can have of the program. And it just so happens that Smart also kind of pivoted back to a similar idea on Saturday. Georgia goes out and just throttles Vanderbilt. I don't think I've ever seen an SEC team beat another SEC team as bad as I saw Georgia beat Vanderbilt on Saturday. It was just thorough domination on both sides of the ball. Georgia kind of sleptwalked a little bit for a certain point in the second quarter, but that probably only prevented the game from being 100-0 as opposed to 62-0. And it just seemed like Georgia, regardless of the opponent, was really firing on all cylinders. And Kirby Smart, after the game, really kind of talked about that there's a level of focus that is almost irrespective of your opponent, regardless of who it is that you might be playing. It's about coming out here and trying to see how focused you can be, how attuned to every detail you can be. That is seemingly what matters more than anything else. And Smart had kind of a particular analogy that he used to sort of describe all of that. So in light of what Pittman just said about Smart's keen attention to detail, here are Smart's own words on a similar topic after the game Saturday against the Commodores.
The biggest emphasis for us has been this trajectory that we wanted to be on. And we've talked a long time about every week we get to reset it. We gave the analogy of the 1 in 60, for every 1 degree you're off your target with a plane, every 60 miles you travel, you land 1 mile off course. So we kind of said, hey, if we're headed to LA, every 60 miles we travel, we could land 27, 37 miles off target. And we have a chance to correct that 1 degree, just 1 degree. We have a chance to correct that every Sunday and Monday. And if we go correct that 1 degree off and we get back on track, we can hit our target. But if at any point in time we don't think we need to correct that 1 or 2 degrees we're off, then we can get in trouble and miss our target. And our guys have kind of bought into that analogy of steering this plane the right direction.
Let me tell you why I think that matters. Sam Pittman saying Kirby Smart's so attentive to details that he's worried about his 6th string offensive line potentially in a game that he might be playing. Or Smart saying, hey, we're going to obsess over course correcting and tightening things up even by just 1 degree, because 1 degree over the course of a long haul can make a huge difference in your trajectory. Let me tell you why I think that matters. Let me tell you why I think that's more than just puffery, that why I think this is like a real thing that Georgia's really seemingly doing here at this particular point in time. This goes back to what we talked about on last Monday's show, where he said, boy, it really looks like this is kind of a chaotic year. Kirby Smart himself in last week's post-game press conference called this a odd year, a strange year for college football. And if that seemed true last Saturday, it seems even more true right now. Chaos seems to be reigning around the sport. We've had a ton of ranked teams already lose, And some of the very best teams in college football have certainly not looked like what we'd expect them to look like. You had Oklahoma and Spencer Rattler, its quarterback, struggling on Saturday against West Virginia. Fans openly calling for Rattler's backup, Caleb Williams, to be playing there in Norman. That's an Oklahoma team right now that does not look like the way it was supposed to look. You had Clemson lose again on Saturday. Clemson's been in every college football playoff since 2015. They will not be in the college football playoff here this year. A very un-Dabo Sweeney-like year for the Tigers. They have now been voted off the island, and we're not even to October yet. You had Ohio State, which has struggled mightily thus far this season. Already lost to Oregon, has scuffled in some games other than that. Had a player quit during the game on Saturday, creating an unbelievable level of controversy and distraction there in Columbus. That's another big-time program that has just seemed somewhat chaotic this year. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the year of chaos on the field seems to fairly well coincide with the off-season of chaos off the field that's led up to all this. You can think about pandemic stuff if you want to, but we've also had the proliferation of the transfer portal. We've had name, image, likeness. We've had all these strange things. And on a show like this that had a little bit of skepticism about name, image, likeness, it is not lost on us. It is not lost on us at all that two of the biggest names in the preseason name, image, likeness conversation, the aforementioned Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, who's doing Dr. Pepper commercials and things like that. It's not lost on us at all that Rattler and Uiagalelei are probably the two biggest disasters in the sport right now in terms of where their preseason expectation was and where their current in-season performance is. There is a case to be made that neither guy has handled the newfound attention of being a NIL darling particularly well. Certainly their teams have seemed to suffer around all of this, to go along with Ohio State and some others who right now are just having a hard time dealing with the season's worth of chaos that we've already had through the first month of the 2021 season. But lo and behold, Georgia just seems to avoid all of that, at least thus far. And obviously what happens for the first month is no guarantee for what's going to happen for the next 3 months. I understand all of that. But thus far, Georgia has done a really good job avoiding that chaos. JT Daniels is seemingly cashing in very well on name, image, likeness opportunities right now, but he certainly doesn't seem to be distracted when he's playing at the moment. He's playing at a very high level. The Georgia offense around him playing at a very high level too. The Georgia defense is legitimately scary for the opponents that it's playing right now. Georgia got past a Clemson game where maybe it just had to do whatever it could do to win, and it's been coasting for the last 3 weeks since then. There is chaos happening all around college football, but at the moment, Georgia's just simply not a participant in it. So even though a lot of what has happened over the course of the calendar year, off-season, leading to the start of the season, has been chaotic for college football, it certainly seems like it's possible that Kirby Smart, who was so attentive to details when Sam Pittman worked here, they were looking at all of the possible offensive line combinations that could potentially play in a game, and so interested in fine-tuning the on-field product for his team, they are, as Smart said a moment ago, trying to course-correct even by just 1 degree because of how much a difference just 1 degree over time can make. It seems like Kirby Smart, who has openly said before that he doesn't love a lot of the things with the current state of college football, it seems like he was still able to experience it, create a plan for it, and it seems like right now he is managing that better than a lot of other programs might be managing their own situations in what is, for the sport, just a pretty strange year all the way around. So keep that in mind. Georgia in October, as the month gets ready to begin on Saturday, is right where it wanted to be, right where some would have expected it to be. But when you look around at all the other programs that started the season in the preseason top 5 and all the other programs that began the year with the same national championship expectation that Georgia has, who don't find themselves in as similar a position right now, in as advantageous a position right now as Georgia finds itself in, then understand it is not a foregone conclusion that Georgia would be here. But thus far, it has been as advertised and needs to continue now in the games to come. But given the attention to detail that Smart has already shown, given the level of focus that Georgia has already shown, that has allowed the Dogs to avoid the chaos that seems to be afflicting some of the programs, I think after 1 month, Georgia deserves a good bit of credit for all of that. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We actually start at 9:45 in the morning with our First and 15 at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. And so however you're watching us on video, we appreciate you doing that. Also, for those of you that check us out on the podcast, whether it's the Apple Player, Spotify, worldfamousdawgnation.com. We post the show each and every day there. A lot of you listen directly on SoundCloud, which is cool with us there too. The Google Play on the Android devices, all kinds of podcast platforms that folks check us out on. We appreciate that. Our friends in Athens on the radio, on Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref, we love that one there too, because our folks there in the Classic City, we always like keeping them company as they're going to lunch or whatever it is they're doing. Just really happy to have all of you with us. And a big thanks to Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. You know, Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help equip you with energy-efficient windows and doors. It's great this time of year because it keeps what's supposed to be inside on the inside and what's supposed to be on the outside on the outside. It's a nationally known company, which means you get unparalleled resources, but it's a locally owned branch right here in Georgia, which means you get unrivaled service. You also get great savings here at the moment there as well. Check this out for you. Between now and October 28th, you can get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% interest if you'll pay for your project in full within the first 12 months with regular payments. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia can do for you. Also, great warranties, unparalleled expertise, and all of that. Easy to find there as well. You can give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Or the website, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Just when you reach out to them, just remember this, though. Please tell them that BA from DawgNation Daily said they would take good care of you, because I know that they will. All right, it is John Stinchcomb coming up. We'll do a Classic City Lager Insider Update with John here coming up in a couple of moments. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse and talk about the 50,000-pound elephant in the room when it comes to Georgia's game against Arkansas coming up, the thing that kind of hangs like a dark cloud over the game, at least in the mind of a lot of fans. And it's Around the Doghouse presented by AAA. We'll get this conversation going. And that is the presence of the noon game start for Georgia against Arkansas. And no matter how you try to make it be okay, for a lot of folks, it's just kind of disappointing. And really, I'm no different on that. Even though Saturday's a work day for me, and it actually makes it a little easier to get my work done and feel like I have a little bit of a weekend with the earlier start. Selfishly, I almost benefit from it. But even if that's the case, I would still rather it be a night game. I'm bleary-eyed and absolutely exhausted on Sunday morning, but I'll take that every single time because of the atmosphere that is created for one of those night games. It's just better for recruiting. It's better for the moment in the game. Does it help Georgia win the game? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. It's just a lot more fun to be there for the night game, and that's what most fans, I think, kind of understand. And in fact, recent Georgia commit Carlton Madden Jr., I think, spoke for a lot of fans about this on social media when he recently posted the noon start with the hand over the head kind of emoji deal there. That's the way a lot of Georgia fans, I think, if you're watching on video, that emoji, I think, fairly well speaks to what Georgia fans feel about all of this. It's just oh gosh, it's a noon game. And, if you don't live in Athens, this is the thing you got to understand. To even be there in time for the game to begin, you have to leave your house pretty early. I mean, Georgia will have a lot fewer elite recruits for a game like this than they otherwise would have had, because if you're playing on Friday night, you're not getting done until midnight. You're not leaving the stadium until very, very late. You're going home. Then you got to wake up really early to try to make it to Athens. That's just logistically a very difficult thing to do. So I think Madden showing that frustration there is the way that a lot of folks just kind of feel. It's just not nearly as fun when it comes to the noon start on all of this. Now, to make the TV experience better, though, there is a lot happening around the game that certainly make this feel like the atypical noon start. First of all, ESPN's College Game Day is going to be there. They put this out there on Twitter yesterday. The live from Athens, Georgia, in the Classic City for Georgia and Arkansas. So kind of a fun deal that the game will be highlighted on ESPN all morning long, and then you'll roll right into the noon start there on the big network. And by the way, to make the game feel even bigger, you don't see this very much. Normally, Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit called the 8 p.m. game on ABC. But on Saturday, Fowler and Herbstreit are calling the noon game there on ESPN, as Fowler said on Twitter yesterday that he was excited to call the high noon collision of the Dogs and the Razorbacks between the hedges. He says, I rarely gets a chance to call an SEC regular season game. So Chris Fowler in business for this one on Saturday and apparently looking forward to all of it. However, if you're in the stadium, the fact that game day's there, the fact that Fowler's there, does not do all that much to make you feel better about the fact that you're not getting the night light show, and you're not getting that. That kind of like golden hour of the before the sun sets in Athens, when you have like the west end zone, you can see the beautiful sky. I mean, it's just so perfect, especially as you kind of get into the fall. I mean, there really is a loss, and I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There is a loss when the game's not taking place at night. Noon compared to the night is just not as good. I just totally acknowledge that. However, according to Georgia coach Kirby Smart, you as a fan have a job to do. Sometimes when you have a job, you got to shake off your feelings and say, it doesn't matter how I feel, I just got some work to do. And for those of you that plan on being there on Saturday, that's exactly what Kirby Smart in so many words told you on Saturday. He wants you to shake off your feelings, get over your disappointment about not being a noon start. Apparently there's nothing that Georgia can do about that, but he still wants that atmosphere to be rocking and rolling against the Razorbacks on Saturday. Now, before I play this story, let me just say this. Like, some of these Zoom press conferences are just an absolute disaster. I don't know how else to say it. This is like really strong audio from Kirby Smart, but at one point in time, somebody's laptop is not on mute, and so there's all kinds of like odd noise. I didn't want to edit that part out, though, because what Smart is saying is really good and strong. So this is not on my end. This is just the continued disaster that is the Zoom stuff, and many of you in your own work life are continuing to deal with the same thing. College football, in this case, no different. So here is a very strong challenge from Kirby Smart to Georgia fans to set that alarm clock, get a game face on really early, fuel up however you need to make that possible, and be ready for the kickoff there. Here's Kirby Smart after the game on Saturday.
I want to issue a challenge, and I want it to be heard right now. We got a huge game next week at 12 o'clock in Athens, Georgia. And everybody wants our team to be elite, and I want our team to be elite, and we've thrown that word around. So when we talk about our fan base, being elite, we want to be there early and show up better than we ever have. We want to be loud, which is the L, louder than we ever have. We want to be super intense, because the players are going to be intense. We need the fans to be intense. The toughness that we're going to show, we need our fan base to show. And the last thing is elite. So if our fans will be elite, we'll have an opportunity to put on a heck of a show at 12 o'clock at Sanford Stadium next week.
A heck of a show, Smart says, 12 o'clock at Sanford Stadium on Saturday. And I hope it can be that way. I have a sense that Georgia fans will do that. I think they take this kind of stuff seriously. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to be so honest a moment ago that, yeah, it is disappointing that the game's at noon. I'm not going to sit here and say, it doesn't matter. Game time is no big deal. No, it is. I mean, if you were at that South Carolina game 2 weeks ago, a night game in Sanford Stadium right now is really pretty fun. And I'll just say this real quick, and then I won't bring this up again. Like, I do think the SEC owes it to, college football fans to give a little bit more transparency about why certain things are the way they are, because when it comes to the recruits that show up at the game, when it comes to the atmosphere inside the game, the night game value is just so high now. The noon game start. This is not like the NFL where like most of the games, the majority of the games take place at 1 p.m. Eastern time. College football is a little bit different in that regard. There is just a big loss for a game at noon compared to the games that take place a little bit later on. And so, understanding the commodity that is a game that kicks off later on in the evening, a little bit of transparency from the SEC about why it is. Does everybody have to take one for the team and do a noon start? Is this only something that Georgia's being asked to do for its big top 10 showdown? A little bit more transparency would be nice. Of course, we're not going to get it. The SEC hides behind its shield on every big issue. No explanation for bad officiating calls for the most part or anything like that. They'll hide behind the shield on this too. But a little bit more transparency about exactly why it is that Georgia got stiffed on the noon start, I think would do fans well. But now that we've said that, as a fan of Georgia myself, I want to take Smart seriously too, and hopefully call on Georgia fans themselves to do what needs to be done to make Saturday feel as big as it needs to feel. And I have no doubt Georgia fans will rise to the occasion on all of that. That is Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA, and I was on the road a lot this weekend. From Atlanta to Warner Robins on Friday, from Warner Robins back towards Nashville throughout the weekend, then Nashville back home again on Saturday evening. And when I'm rolling down the road, I'm always thankful I have that legendary roadside assistance for AAA because I want them to take good care of me if I break down on the side of the road. Goodness knows I'm not going to be able to fix whatever's broken. And that's what AAA can provide that peace of mind for. But that's not the only peace of mind that AAA can provide when it comes to your vehicle. They also offer tremendous savings on auto insurance as well. Did you know that when you switch and save your auto insurance with AAA, you can save on average $529? That's a great deal. That's great savings. And it's a good thing to know. So find out more about it today by going to the website. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. AAA.com/auto insurance. You can find out a lot more about that. Switch and save your auto insurance with AAA here today. That is Around the Doghouse, assisted by AAA. Over the course of our program, before we're done, I want to talk a little bit more about the emergence of the Georgia playmakers, such as Brock Bowers in particular, who I think right now has the look of really something pretty special for UGA, the likes of which they haven't had very much in recent seasons. That's how good I think that Bowers has been thus far. But before we get to that, my thoughts on that, let's get some thoughts from a former All-American, a guy who watched the game against Vanderbilt closely on Saturday and saw some very interesting stuff, and he'll help us break it down now and a look ahead to Arkansas and Sam Pittman there too. So it's our Classic City Lager Insider Update. Our insider is John Stinchcomb. Let's talk to him right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
John, we'll say hello to you and appreciate you being here as part of Classic City Lager Insider Update. You know, it's a very interesting stage set for the game against Arkansas on Saturday, where you've got ESPN's College Game Day there. You've got the number one broadcast team broadcasting the game. You've got, top 10 teams on both sides here. But for the fan, he's been challenged or she's been challenged by Kirby Smart to get in there and make a lot of noise and get over the fact that you're disappointed that it's a noon star and not one of these coveted nighttime starts with all the technology that exists in the stadium now. The games just look so much cooler at night. Do you kind of get where the fan is coming from on this, that even with the extra bells and whistles around the game from a TV standpoint, there's just a little something kind of lost when you're forced to set that alarm clock early to even get there in time for the game? Do you kind of get where the fans are coming from on that?
Absolutely, and the players do too. I think the best part of it was seeing the reaction of how Georgia responded in Vandy to a noon game against a far inferior opponent with not a electrifying atmosphere up there. Despite the fact there were being more red and black than yellow and black up there, it's a different atmosphere. And to see, what do you expect in a noon game against an inferior opponent? You're going to start slow. You're going to not be up for the game until halfway through, and then you finally wake up, and Georgia had none of that on Saturday. So I think that bodes really well for the team, and now Kirby's trying to get the fans on board with that belief of, hey, just because it's a noon start, that's not something we can control, but something that is our effort and our ability to influence the game. So it seems like he had the players in line and buying in on Saturday, and now he wants the fans to do the same against Arkansas for the coming up weekend. So
let me ask you that for a moment, because I'm a big believer that body clock is a real thing, right? Before I did this job, I've done about every job you can do in media, and a couple times I filled in on the 11 o'clock news. When you have to be your best, I'm talking about your most aware, alert at 11:15 or 11:25 at night, whenever it is the sports is happening on a local news broadcast. I can tell you, as someone who's done that, that's really pretty weird, because normally I'm at my best around the time that you and I are speaking live right now. In the morning, that's when most people are doing their work. To be at your best at 11:25 at night when you're doing the sportscast is just kind of a strange thing to do. You have to train your body to know how to do that. And in sports, I think it's much the same way. And I guess what I'm building to here by a question is, when it comes to the challenges of getting your body ready to go, is it harder to do that for a game that starts at night, or is it harder to do that for a game that starts at noon? Which one of the game, forget the distraction and the lack of crowd noise or whatever might typically be a problem in a noon game. Just from a body clock standpoint as a player, what's the easier one to retrain your body for? The slightly earlier start or the slightly later start?
Well, I always had an easier time adjusting to night games than those quick games. Now, you play in the NFL, and it's a little bit different because most of your games are at 1 o'clock, and You're used to routine, and I think that's what matters most. And for players is the familiarity. If you're used to, and Georgia certainly is, at least they're veterans, are used to playing night games because they're usually the marquee games, at least later afternoon. Then that's what you're prepared for. You're prepared for that routine of meetings in the morning and being in your hotel room for a few hours, and you're used to that schedule, and I think that's what influences players most is that comfort with the routine. And when you change that up a little bit, it's like anything else. You have to make adjustments, and those that are prepared for it, and I think coaches certainly do influence it in getting guys mentally ready for that kind of transition. It matters, and obviously Georgia had them dialed in on Saturday, and the players went out there, and there was no lag. So same thing for fans. I mean, you're used to your routine. I get in my spot at this time, and somebody's on the grill this many hours before the game. You speed that up on Saturday, and all of a sudden you feel like you're scrambling a little bit. So I think it's like we just talked about for the coaches and the team. Having a plan is going to be important for us to answer the call that Coach Smart has placed on our performance on Saturday, which is to show up and show out and make it a pretty challenging atmosphere for the Razorbacks when they come to town on Saturday.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I guess I was also kind of told through the grapevine that in the time leading up to the game against Clemson week 1 that Georgia did spend some like body clock style preparations, moving practices later, especially that weekend prior to the game, just to get the team kind of in that rhythm of having had been practicing in the afternoons, what most teams do, to now you're practicing, kind of doing some stuff at night because you got to get used to waiting all day to go out and do your football thing there that following Saturday night. So Georgia did take that kind of stuff pretty seriously. And it kind of speaks to, John, the attention to detail that I guess that Kirby Smart's really become famous for. I played some audio earlier of Sam Pittman talking about that. Smart himself addressed his own desire to always be tinkering and trying to fine-tune things after the game Saturday against Vanderbilt. And I think thus far, it's not a guarantee of what's going to happen the rest of the season, but thus far, John, I do think that Georgia deserves some credit for this, that we see chaos abounding in college football. Clemson's been in every playoff since 2015, won't be there this year. Oklahoma is seemingly a shell of what we expected to be based on what it has been in recent years. They're even struggling a little bit at the quarterback spot right now, something we don't typically see them do. Fans calling out the starting quarterback, wanting to see the backup play more. Ohio State had a player quit during the game on Saturday. There's a lot of chaos for elite big-time teams, and Georgia's just kind of right now just sailing right on through and doing what needs to be done. That to me is not insignificant, that in what has been a strange year for college football, Georgia's had very little strangeness whatsoever. They have managed seemingly the chaos pretty well, and I am impressed by it, and I guess this Saturday against Arkansas, with all the other potential distractions that could come into play here, my guess is that Georgia won't succumb to any of that if I had to make a prediction.
Well, I'm almost giddy, BA, as most fans, Georgia fans are, and you're looking across the board, and these elite programs, they don't look quite as elite. There's so many vulnerabilities in their armor that you don't usually see. The fact that Oklahoma is, a preseason Heisman candidate and Spencer Rattler, and all of a sudden there's boos coming from the stands, and I mean, across the board, Clemson is a mere shell of what they usually are this time of year when they're looking invincible, playing that inferior ACC schedule that they face. So that's exterior. Those are teams that you're looking at outside of the ones in Athens. But the big test is coming this month for Georgia. Is our excitement for what's going on outside, and the fact that Georgia so far has looked like at least the number 2 team in the country, if not the number 1 team in the country at times. Is that for real? And this month of October, we're going to find out. And hats off to Coach Pittman, because I would be the first to admit I didn't think Arkansas was capable of a top 10 team. And for him to put one together as quickly as he has, Saturday will prove a lot of things, and one is the legitimacy of that program. So, a lot will be told on Saturday, not only for Georgia, but across the landscape of college football. And I'm pretty pumped about it because really this team in this year is situated in a way that you have to think is very favorable to Georgia finding that end-of-the-year success that we also covet.
I want to talk to you about the Vanderbilt game for a moment on Saturday. Seems like we probably should since it just got played. I think there are a lot of people that assume, well, there's nothing you can take about Georgia from this game because of how bad the opponent was and how easy the game was. But, John, here's a theory that I very much believe in, that easy wins aren't as easy to come by as sometimes people assume. And you can look back at Georgia the last couple of years and see a couple of games in SEC play that were maybe supposed to be easier than they turned out to be. Think about the frustrations like a year ago of, Georgia at Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's not a terrible team. They're much better than this Vanderbilt team is. But Georgia only wins that game 14-3 and really had to scuffle for every point and every yard it got that day. In 2019, Georgia lost as a more than 3-touchdown favorite to South Carolina. That sometimes making an easy game look easy is a little harder than sometimes we assume it's going to be. So the fact that Georgia goes out there and really on both sides of the ball was as dominant as it was, to the point that you were pulling starters at the end of the first quarter and playing a lot of backups and just Georgia could have made it as bad as it wanted to on Saturday. I do kind of take something from Georgia about that, about the level of focus that it has right now, the level of intensity, just the depth of talent that makes a game like that appear to be so dominant. What did you learn from Georgia against Vanderbilt on Saturday?
Well, I've played in those games. We've seen those games where you play down to your opponent's level, and it takes you a while to get up to speed and say, hey, we can't just roll our hats out here. We're going to actually play to win and actually execute on what we're coached. And boy, did Georgia come out swinging. Now, Vandy didn't help themselves. They had those turnovers early in that quarter, and you can't do that against the giant that Georgia is. And, that's on Vandy's side. But for Georgia to come out and execute, right? I mean, mentally, I think it's the biggest factor when and everyone in the stadium knows that you've got the better team. You still have to go out there and prove it, because what's Vandy telling their guys? Hey, we're gonna swing our best punch. There's nothing to lose, and that's what you've got to almost weather or answer in that first part of the game, because you want to crush their confidence. And Georgia did that. For any inferior opponent, they all think that maybe we can stay toe-to-toe. In the back of their minds, they're going, I feel slighted that I didn't get these opportunities, and I wasn't the 5 stars and the 4-star guy. And I need to prove, I've got something to prove that, on a personal level. And you go out there and you answer that pretty quickly, and I think you slam the door the way Georgia does, and it demoralizes your opponent, and it also invigorates the guys on your sideline, because you've set that tempo early that we're not here to play. This isn't about Vanderbilt. This is about the University of Georgia and the fact that we've got something special, and I refuse to let anyone across from us take that from us, even if they are the I feel so sorry for this underdog story. I certainly don't. You lined up across from me, and now we got to play, and you put your best foot forward, and Georgia did that exceptionally well in that first quarter, to the point where they're already rolling in subs, like you said. So a testament to the mentality that's being created and fostered at Georgia right now. At
the risk of being a wet blanket, I do want to ask you before we go your thoughts about maybe a potential concern or two. We'll do that coming up in a moment. But first, let me remind folks, this is our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb, of course, our friends at Classic City Lager. Such a big part of so many tailgates this time of year, because it's a great taste of the city of Athens, the Classic City, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. It's available in 6 and 12-pack cans. Wherever you're doing your shopping all year long, you can get yourself some Classic City Lager. It's just really, really delicious to enjoy. And as you think about a noon start on Saturday, I got to tell you, it probably tastes pretty good for breakfast there too. Get yourself a biscuit, put some sausage on that, maybe a little egg, and a little Classic City lager to go alongside that before you head into the game on Saturday at the stadium. I don't think that's a bad choice there at all. And in all seriousness, whatever you're doing this time of year, however you're enjoying yourself with what you got going on, a little Classic City lager from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company is a great choice on that. I'm a simple guy. I like simple things. Classic City Lager is just good, cold beer. It's a lager-style beer, lighter flavor, but listen, it's no sacrifice in taste, though. This is a craft-style lager. That means that you've got really special care, intricate details. Folks who love beer have made Classic City Lager, so there's a lot of love in each can that you're going to drink. So enjoy that today from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company, some Classic City Lager, including this Saturday if you're heading over to the Classic City for the game against the Hogs there. All right, John, so if you want to find a nitpick, Georgia got the short yardage situation on fourth down against Vanderbilt. They bring in, Jordan Davis. They just bring in the whole student body, seemingly. You don't convert the short yardage play there. The best running plays on Saturday were the ones involving guys like Brock Bowers and Vlad McConkey on sweeps, not necessarily the running backs themselves. You got to run the ball better to beat the best teams you're going to play. What are you seeing as the steps are taken to get that done, whether it be offensive line, a lot of tinkering on Saturday? Kendall Milton didn't play at all. Zamir White played sparingly, so maybe you don't take too much from that one way or another. But what do you see about something that you and I both have kind of said has been a work in progress up to this point?
Well, it's hard to assess because of the number of bodies that rolled through the game. Obviously, Broderick Jones was the first sub to come in and had legitimate time, and I think he's probably somebody that there's factoring into the equation, even if it's not a blowout. It seems like he has earned that opportunity to be one of the 6 guys that Georgia is going to deploy on a Saturday. So no excuses there for rotational players. I'd also say that James Cook, in my opinion, has shown flashes of some of the best work that he's done in with a G on the side of his helmet, just because of the way he's run, both internally, externally. He's a factor. With that said, the running game hasn't been what you want it to be, and it hasn't needed to be. But you need to make that progress. I don't know if I saw a ton of that against Vandy, just because of the amount of space that was given in the passing game, and it was not your conventional run game scores with the 2 jet sweeps to McConkey and Bowers, but that's part of the rushing attack that Georgia is deploying right now. There hasn't been the rhythm that we have grown accustomed to with our backs, and Zamir is playing at a high level. I think his vision of hitting the hole is much improved, but there hasn't been that consistency, and it's still a little bit of a concern and something that will need to be addressed. But watching the games, I went back, sadly, and watched the past couple of games just to see what's going on, and there isn't one issue. It's always, a guy had his head on the wrong side of the block, or sometimes it's the slot receiver not digging out a safety that's come down, or recognizing that there's an extra defender to that side, and it might be a situation where you'd be better served to check out, or at least check to a different side of where you're running. So they haven't found that rhythm that they're looking for yet, and nor have they needed to, but it's not something that's insurmountable and not fixable out of this offense. It's just hopefully a matter of time and opportunity for when those plays are really going to start clicking for this Georgia offense.
John, I really appreciate your thoughts on today's show as part of our Classic City Lager Insider Update. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on Saturday against Arkansas. I know you'll be watching that game closely there, too, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to hear more from you about it next week there as well. So appreciate you being here and hope you enjoy your week.
Always a good time, B.A. Go Dogs.
No doubt.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, good stuff from John Stinchcomb there. We'll move into our SEC Through here. I want to highlight a few things from around the league, including a very odd situation unfolding at Auburn. I'm going to tell you about that here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, I'm going to tell you about what's happening right now at Marlowe's Tavern. This isn't odd at all. This is fantastic. It is great. In fact, I'm going to check this out this week because I was talking to my wife before the weekend, knowing we're going to be doing a lot this weekend. I was going to be going to Warner Robins for a really good high school game, and it was. Boy, how good were the Demons on Friday night on Peachtree TV and CBS46.com against Lee County. So impressive. But I knew I was going to be doing that game. I'm going to be in Nashville on Saturday there as well. Quick turnaround to get back home. And I thought, next week, we hadn't really seen each other much during the weekend. I've been working a lot, doing a lot of things. My son's got baseball coming up. My daughter's always got a lot of stuff going on. I said, we just need to go enjoy the ribs and whiskey there at Marlowe's Tavern and just kind of have a good kind of, midweek. We don't do a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of times midweek. A lot of times we're just too busy to do that. Let's go to the tavern right there near us in our neighborhood, and let's just enjoy some ribs and whiskey. So I think this is the week we're going to do that. I'd encourage you to do the same thing because it's actually, of all the promotions, and Marlowe's is really cool about having a bunch of cool stuff always going on. This is probably my favorite one they do. In fact, I know for a fact it's my favorite one they do because it's ribs and whiskey. Like, I don't need to explain more to most of you than that. Certainly we're on the same page when it comes to that. But it's just so much fun. And it pairs so well, like the food with, like, whether it be the cocktails or the wine selections, whatever else. Just Marlowe's Tavern just got so much of this there as well. Also, some of your all-time favorites are back as a part of this event too. The honey bourbon bread pudding dessert, which is so good. Or those special glazes that you can get, whether it be the Jack Daniel's glaze, the Carolina mustard. That's always a lot of fun. Now, if you don't want to go to the dining room and eat this right now, if you want to get it to go, take it to your tailgate on Saturday, you can do that there too. But just so many great choices, whether it's the full rack of ribs, pound of pulled pork, all that kind of stuff. You can just do so much of that for tailgating time, in the restaurant for special night out, whatever it is you need. Just go to marlowestavern.com to find out more. marlowestavern.com to find out more. The Ribs and Whiskey event taking place right now at the tavern right there near you. So make sure you check that out. It is such a great time to be at Marlowe's Tavern. It is not a great time to be on the plains right now at Auburn, though. Auburn had a close call against Georgia State. It was funny. I had the satellite radio on my rental car coming back from Nashville. So as I'm driving back, I'm like trying to flip channels between Auburn and Georgia State and, the Texas A&M Arkansas game and all the other stuff that was kind of going on, trying to follow all these games down to the wire. And it was very interesting just how close Auburn came to losing to Georgia State. And that would not have been good for the Auburn program. And we'll get to the TJ Finley part of this. He comes in, saves Auburn's bacon, and maybe now gets a chance to start against his old team, against LSU on Saturday, which is interesting. But what's more interesting than that for Auburn right now is the fact that Cornelius Williams, the wide receivers coach, was fired after the game. Now, you can jokingly say for Brian Harsin, who came to the SEC from Boise State, trying to keep the message board keyboard warriors at bay and sort of sacrificing an assistant coach to the online mob after a too close for comfort game against a group of 5 opponent. Maybe this was the day that Brian Harsin officially became an SEC coach. You can jokingly say that if you want to, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is not a good look. This is not a good look for Auburn. I tried to spend some time around Auburn media over the last 24 hours to kind of see if there was any kind of like backstory lingering here with Cornelius Williams, a guy that I don't know very much about. And the best I can tell, there really isn't. This seems to be a response to the way the season has started for Auburn. 2 consecutive losses. You'll forgive them for losing at Penn State. Actually, they didn't lose Saturday. So a loss to Penn State, a near miss against Georgia State. You can forgive them for the Happy Valley deal, but you need to play better at home against Georgia State than you did. But my point on all this, though, is this idea that it's somehow Williams' fault that Auburn's not very good at the receiver position. And they are not. Their receivers are not great. But the idea this is somehow Williams' fault when you're this short into the tenure here of this season, knowing that Auburn had lost Anthony Schwartz and Seth Williams and Eli Stokes and some of the guys that Eli Stove, some of the guys that had been contributors in the receiver position before. They were very thin. And the idea that you're making this kind of knee-jerk reaction this soon into a season, honestly, unless there's some sort of mitigating factor that hasn't been made public yet, to me, this is way too similar to what unfolded with Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. First of all, there's an odd symmetry in the fact that Tennessee did lose to Georgia State, and that kind of sealed Jeremy Pruitt's fate. In this particular case, Auburn almost lost to Georgia State. But you remember, Jeremy Pruitt has kind of a knee-jerk reactions like firing his defensive line coach, right? And he's doing that in season, and it just kind of seemed like the kind of thing that a button-up program just would not be doing. That kind of wild, what do you want to call it? Just knee-jerk reaction to poor play to say, well, we got to fire an assistant right here in the middle of the season. Unless something weird happened, unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance in all of this, this kind of makes Brian Harsin appear to be the one who's overmatched, not the receivers coach in particular here. Scapegoating a guy like that so short into his tenure makes it seem like the Auburn program right now is just not very buttoned up. You may have been surprised to see that Alabama, for its big showdown game against Ole Miss on Saturday, opens as a 20-point favorite. Now, I told you that for the people who want to say that all is riding momentum-wise on Ole Miss in this game, and that Alabama is ripe for the picking here after struggling in the win against Florida, and seemingly all the excitement on the side of Matt Corral, who probably has been the best player in college football through these first few weeks of the season, what Lane Kiffin's doing offensively there. I told you before, just be very, very careful. And the point spread makers, the line makers, are trying to tell you the same thing. Be very careful in assuming that Ole Miss has even any chance to keep this game close against Alabama on Saturday. But the game itself will be very interesting. And I think for a Georgia fan, in a roundabout way, it's almost as interesting as what Georgia's going to do against Arkansas, because there is so much you can learn from this. On the one hand, you can learn how many potential playoff-level teams does the SEC have? We know Georgia's one. We believe Alabama is one. And all of a sudden now you're left to assume, what about the next group? What about Arkansas, who plays Georgia on Saturday? What about Ole Miss, who has been kind of riding high thus far this season? What about Florida, who legitimately feels like they proved something by playing Alabama close a couple of weeks ago? How many of these teams currently exist right now that are worthy of that conversation? That's what we could potentially learn about Ole Miss. But on the flip side of that, for a Georgia fan who wants to see, what is the formula? What is the recipe for taking down Alabama? Well, Ole Miss is going to try its thing on Saturday, right? It's going to be a lot of Matt Corral. Some of that will be with his legs. A lot of that's going to be through the air. A lot of that's going to be a play-calling design from Lane Kiffin that legitimately had Alabama pretty flummoxed a year ago. Does that work again on Saturday? And if it does, then I would say a Georgia fan is kidding himself if he thinks anything less than that is going to be successful for Georgia. That if Ole Miss goes out there and if Lane Kiffin even keeps it close on Saturday, and if he's doing Lane Kiffin-type things as a way to do that, that's fairly obviously the blueprint for how Georgia would need to do the same thing. Have JT Daniels playing at his highest, have those playmakers around him, helping raise the level of the offensive play calling overall. A pitch-perfect game from a guy like Todd Monken as being the way that Georgia beats Alabama, if that's indeed what Ole Miss shows you on Saturday. But let's say the opposite happens. Let's say that it's Alabama who, as I assume is going to happen, really asserts itself there at home. And if Ole Miss finds itself not quite ready for a stage like this, then there's also, once again, a couple of things that a Georgia fan can take from that. First of all, Alabama apparently won't be making it easy for Georgia the rest of the season, and Georgia better be thankful that it's got a level of talent depth in its program that Ole Miss would only dream about having right now, and potentially that gives Georgia a better shot in a game like that. So I think the Alabama-Ole Miss game is more than just entertainment. I think it's a potential precursor for what either Georgia will need to do to beat Alabama, or just how easy that task or difficult that task is going to be. Let me kind of finish up with this as part of our SEC through. So a couple things here real quick. LSU holds on to beat Mississippi State. LSU had to have this game. This was a season-saving game for the Tigers. Their year legitimately would have been done had they not won that game on the road. I thought it was a rough look for Eli Drinkwitz, who I kind of like, and I didn't mind his candor going into Saturday's game against Boston College, where he had said that he'd rather not play the game, would rather play a regional rival or a game in a spot where they're going to be likely to pull recruits. He said Massachusetts is not a place they're going to do that. And I don't mind that candor. I don't mind that level of honesty. I wish coaches would be more honest. But if you're going to say those things and provide potential bulletin board material to your opponent, you got to go out and win the game. That's what Missouri forgot to do on Saturday. They lost at Boston College. And I got to tell you, relative to expectations, Missouri's been a little bit of a disappointment for me this season. And this game, another example of that there too. Of course, a lot of you talking about Arkansas's win against Texas A&M. A&M's just not the same team right now than it would have been had it had Haynes King at starting quarterback, and that's all there is to that. This is a team that's really struggling at the quarterback spot right now, and that opened the door for a lot of other exploitation on the part of Arkansas. But listen, give credit to Arkansas. That was their first win after a 9-game losing streak against Texas A&M. They get that and now set up a huge game against Georgia on Saturday. You got to give them a lot of credit for doing so. There's other games around the SEC, but we'll probably talk about those later. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, I want to turn our attention back fully to the Dogs here for a moment, because I think the one thing that you cannot lose sight of for Georgia, even in the midst of a game against Vanderbilt that was fairly unimportant, right? That ultimately was more of a tune-up glorified scrimmage than an actual game. The performance that you got from Brock Bowers in particular was just spectacular. I mean, he's just right now playing at such an uncommonly good level for Georgia. And I said this on Twitter during the game, that for me, the comparison here is not to other tight ends. Oh, Georgia's using the tight end a little bit more. It obviously is, but that's not the takeaway. The takeaway is when you look at the best pass-catching targets that Georgia has had under Kirby Smart, you really look no further than George Pickens, in particular his freshman year in 2019. That's the most touchdowns any receiver has ever had under Kirby Smart and the most receiving yards any receiver has ever had under Kirby Smart. That's what Pickens did as a freshman in 2019. And Brock Bowers right now is on pace to eclipse that number. This, for the moment, is as dynamic a pass-catching weapon as Georgia has had. And whether he plays receiver or whether he plays tight end, that's pretty important. That Georgia needed those dangerous players on the outside, those pass-catching targets in order to be as good as the very best teams in the country have been. And Bowers is on his way to doing that. He had 3 touchdowns on Saturday. And by the way, Ladd McConkey also had a couple there too. It's 2 impact freshmen playing well for Georgia right now. And when the game was done, Kirby Smart threw some compliments in both of their directions.
They're just real tough, hard workers that believe in the process of working really hard. I mean, Ladd McConkey wasn't real heralded either, but he was a guy that we watched, and I said, "What? This guy's fast. He's smart. He's athletic, and he competes. He's tough." And to me, that's a little bit what's missing in football. Like don't tell me how good you are. Show me. And he's done a really good job doing that.
I love that line from Kirby Smart. Don't tell me how good you are. Show me how good you are. Don't follow your own hype, but lead your own hype into a season, into a game, and go out there and prove it each and every day. And, yeah, I was impressed with McConkey on Saturday. I think it's pretty cool how quickly he's become a part of this Georgia offense. I'm telling you right now, what Brock Bowers is doing is potentially special. It's potentially a very dangerous weapon. You better believe that when opposing defenses see Bowers utilized, getting a carry for a touchdown, catching 2 more touchdowns, he got, 5 touchdowns through 4 games. When you see that taking place, I guarantee you opposing defenses have determined that defending Georgia, the job of doing that, just got a whole lot tougher. Gatorade roll call now on our golden shoe. I want to give it out today to Harris English, the Georgia Bulldog, former Dog, as a part of the winning U.S. Ryder Cup team. Boy, what a great event this was. Not very close, but unbelievable. As fun a sporting event as I think exists, and the United States was so impressive. It was good to see Harris English be a part of that. So congratulations to both UGA and USA for that. And by the way, speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, 33 days from right now, Dogs, we think, get some revenge against Florida. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Of course, R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. I was talking to our buddy Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews last night. He's enjoying this college football season thus far, and I hope all of you are doing the same thing. So we do this every now and then. Today's one of those days. And I'll try to make this up to you tomorrow. Last Monday, we went very long with comments, and I tried to kind of bank some goodwill for later on. I think tomorrow I'm going to have to go long with comments as a way of paying you back for maybe not taking good care of you right now. I've got 1,000 things I've got to do today. So we're going to be quick with comments and then out the door after that. So I'll do Facebook first. I'll do YouTube. I'll do DawgNation.com. And then we'll roll out of here. And I hope all of you are doing very, very well. So on video, on Facebook, let's check in here first. Brian Williamson giving our buddy Shelton Tucker a little bit of trouble. Santiago D. Arnold says, your thoughts on Dabo, Swinney, and Clemson. Last year, I thought they were a few injuries away from being average, and they have a lot of injuries, and now they look bad. Yeah, so here's the thing, I think, for Clemson. Like, Clemson recruits in a very different way than Georgia does. And to be honest with you, I actually kind of like the fact that Dabo Swinney tries to, create as much drama-free recruitment as he possibly can. They don't offer a ton of guys. They, seemingly target the guys they want, and they don't really waver from that. But when you see what can happen to a program, you are forced to realize, there's a reason that most programs don't recruit this way. Because one of the things that's very quietly gone on with Clemson is they have not really been stacking the elite offensive linemen very well. They've recruited a very small number of linemen in recent years. And there is a direct straight line correlation. Like the old school guy who, was writing for newspapers back in the 80s, sometimes they try to recruiting rankings are overrated. But ultimately, though, these population counts don't lie. That if you're not pulling a pretty big population of elite recruits, you are going to point straight ahead into the future of some problem that you're eventually going to have. And Clemson has just not signed enough elite offensive linemen to have a good offensive line, and you're seeing that. Some of the running back stuff kind of the same way there too, where all of a sudden you've only got just enough running backs, but if Lynn J. Dixon goes to the transfer portal, if DeMarcus Bowman goes to the transfer portal, all of a sudden now you don't quite have enough anymore. And all of that lack of roster depth can be made up for if you've got an all-time great quarterback. And I legitimately think, from a college football standpoint, the previous two Clemson starters, Trevor Lawrence and then Deshaun Watson before him, were all-time great quarterbacks. And Taj Boyd before Deshaun was not a bad one either, but Watson and Lawrence were all-time greats, college football Hall of Fame level quarterbacks. And so when you've got a quarterback that is that good, it can cover up some of your other roster deficiencies, especially when you're playing against an ACC schedule. But now, for the moment, DJ Uiagalelei is not a Trevor Lawrence, and he's not a Deshaun Watson. And all of a sudden now you're forced to notice the other things that Clemson has going on in its program, and it's too few offensive linemen. It's too few elite running backs. And thus far, Will Shipley is just kind of a guy. He's just sort of okay. And he's also hurt now, too. And then I saw the awful news where Brian Brzee is now out for the season. I don't certainly wish that on him or Clemson or anybody else. But, all of a sudden you're kind of forced to see the warts and the foibles that your program has because all of a sudden you don't have a Mount Rushmore level quarterback playing for you. Randy Hall on the subject of Georgia Tech beating UNC. Yeah, so I haven't really seen much of Tech the last 2 weeks. And they've also got Pitt coming up on Saturday, I think, which is kind of an interesting game. For those of you that have seen Tech, what is going on here? Are they playing better? Because they did keep it close against Clemson, but all of a sudden right now Clemson does not look to be a very good team, and they did beat UNC. I did see where I guess they got some turnovers, and they were on short fields a lot. And listen, if you're a Tech fan tuning in, I'm not I don't care enough to disparage your win. It's meaningless to me. But so I'm not trash talking your program. I'm honestly trying to figure out what happened. Did Tech play well in the win against North Carolina? I honestly don't know. If you saw the game, I'd love to hear it. Matt Rukavina also says, Dabo Swinney doesn't go into the portal, and that's true. They just sign a lot fewer guys than these other programs do. And as I said before, Rick used to kind of be the same way. And if Rick had hit on some of his later quarterbacks as well as Dabo Swinney hit on his, then Mark Richt could have been Dabo Swinney. I mean, in a lot of ways, Dabo Swinney stole Mark Richt's brand, the kind of family-friendly, good dude, not trying to be into all the intense drama stuff of recruiting. Richt oftentimes saved scholarships, which, listen, you love Coach Richt, but, sometimes that creates some issues. And, Swinney kind of the same way. But Swinney had Deshaun Watson, so it didn't matter. And Swinney had Trevor Lawrence, so it didn't really matter. But, people wonder, could Mark Richt have won a national championship with Georgia? When you see Dabo Swinney working his process in a very similar situation to Richt, you realize, yeah, it absolutely could have worked out. You just had to hit on that very big quarterback, to kind of be able to do that, especially in a college football playoff era. So that's right. And so, Swinney's not playing the portal game. And if you're not doing that in 2021, good luck. Good luck. It ain't pretty, and I don't like the transfer portal. But at the same time, it's like, to quote The Godfather, this is the business we've chosen. At a certain point in time, you got to be You got to be in it if you want to, be a part of it. Buck Brinson, the subject of Larry Munson and the More Than a Voice SEC Network deal. I watched the snippet of Munson this morning that was shared by the SEC Network. It was like 6.5 minutes long. I haven't seen the full broadcast. I definitely want to see it because even though I'm only a fan of Georgia, I have great respect for the other legendary voices who've kind of come through the SEC. The Munson part that I saw, I thought was just sensational. I just thought it was terrific. And I started going to the Georgia press box. The first year I was there was in 2004. And I can promise you that the coolest thing for me as a youngster going into that press box for the first time was the presence of Larry Munson, seeing him walk by and being close to him. I never spoke to him, and I've never said one word to Larry Munson. Never said one word to Munson while he was living. But it was always awe-inspiring to be in the same room and have Munson walk by. But in 2004, and then through, I guess, Munson's last year doing the games in 2008, I believe I have that year right. It was just so overwhelming to even be in the same space as Munson, giving the reverence I had for him growing up. But he was also much, much older. He was near the end of his life at that point in time. And so what's cool about the SEC Network broadcast that they are highlighting these play-by-play men was the fact that you go back and see a lot of footage from Munson, including him talking when he was much younger and when he kind of had that, that swagger. And that's a really cool thing to be able to see because, the Munson that I encountered face-to-face was already a much later in life version of Larry Munson. Like one of the things that he would always do is he'd always walk the stadium before the game. And so, I would be getting to the stadium, I'd see him walking, and that was always kind of a cool thing, to be able to see because I'd heard about him doing that for all these years, and I'd see that. But the version of Munson that I was seeing doing that was just a much older guy, older, much later in life. But to see the younger Munson, to see the Munson that was so full of life and so full of energy, I just love that from the SEC Network telecast. It was really, really good. Let's go over to YouTube here for a moment and see what folks are saying over there. And then, as I said before, we got to get out of here pretty quick after that. We'll do a couple more minutes. On YouTube, Frank Patterson says, we're saving our big running game plays for this week versus Arkansas. Didn't want them to have anything on tape. That's why we focused on Bryce and Ladd and running the ball. Maybe that's the case. It does seem like we've been hearing now for however many years that Georgia's saving its real offense for some future game, and sometimes it doesn't always quite work out that way. But I certainly expect Georgia to play well against Arkansas on Saturday. I mean, this is the kind of position that I think that Georgia fans have been on the other end on a few times where you've got the big showcase game and you want to prove that you're ready for it, but in the past, sometimes Georgia has found out it wasn't quite ready for a game like this, and obviously Georgia's on the other end of that right now, where I think we have a much better idea of how Georgia will play. However, let me give you one warning about one thing. In some ways, what has unfolded here kind of reminds me a little bit of the 2019 season, where Georgia coasted against Arkansas State, coasted against Murray State, and then had the top 10 showdown set up with Notre Dame coming up, and Georgia was about as big a favorite against Notre Dame as it is against Arkansas on Saturday. And while Georgia won the game, and while it was like the greatest atmosphere that I think any of us had ever seen at Sanford Stadium up to that point, it was not a great performance by Georgia. They gave up, 7 catches to the Notre Dame tight end Cole Kmet in the first half. Really struggled to win. Did not move the ball very well offensively and had to kind of prevent a late last-minute drive from Notre Dame just to even preserve the victory. That Georgia, after coasting against lesser opponents for much of September in its first big test as a big favorite, kind of scuffled a little bit. I think this Georgia team is better than that. That's kind of the reason why I bring it up. It's a measuring stick to see how much Georgia's improved from 2019, which was the last full season for college football with real fans and all that kind of stuff. To see Georgia in a similar spot on Saturday, does it play better and does it win more emphatically against a team that's a similar-sized underdog? I think it can show some program growth by what it plays like against Arkansas on Saturday. Memphis Dog give me a hard time about my Texas A&M pick. To be fair, I did not pick Texas A&M to win the SEC West, and I think if anything, the reasons I cited for why they wouldn't win the West were on display against Arkansas on Saturday. And, of course, those issues only exasperated by the presence of a backup quarterback. Green Soldier also mentions hoping to see a lot of those injured guys coming back. I heard Washington, Smith were all possibilities to come back. Yeah, I think that there's a very good chance that's true. I think this is the time when they could be coming back anyway, and obviously more motivation to hold them out one more time at Arkansas because you don't really, Vanderbilt, because you don't really need them in preparation for what has a chance to happen against Arkansas on Saturday. So I'd be surprised that's not the case, including a guy like Kendall Milton who did travel but didn't play on Saturday for what's been described as a shoulder injury. Get a chance to see more of those guys. Mark Hood asked about my high school football broadcast. So in the Atlanta area, we're on Peachtree TV every Friday night. If you have cable, you have Peachtree TV. It's the old Channel 17. On streaming for those outside the Atlanta TV footprint, we're streaming every single Friday night at CBS46.com. That's the local CBS affiliate in Atlanta. Their website, CBS46.com. We stream those broadcasts. Andrew Hughes says, told y'all we were going to hang 60 on that Professor X and those band of mutants. Yeah, good stuff on that. Jay Shipes, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Jalen Jackson also talking about the reasons why the Georgia game may be at noon on Saturday. John Quick on the losing taking place in Jacksonville right now. Yeah, two guys that haven't done a lot of losing. Trevor Lawrence, as a quarterback during his career, had never lost in the regular season as a high school or college quarterback before he got to the NFL, and he's now losing a lot, including throwing a really bad interception yesterday. And Urban Meyer, much the same way, has not done a lot of regular season losing. You wonder how they're going to handle that in Jacksonville, and I don't mind telling you, I am very, very, very curious about that. Dwayne G. also asking about Dominic Blaylock, and I'd say I think that Blaylock's probably a possibility too. I do. Richard Pollard wants to forget about the James Coley-influenced 2019 season, and I can understand why you would. Reginald Johnson said, I had 60-plus in that game for Saturday as well, but I was also hoping for 70. Well, Reginald, certainly they came very close to being able to do that. William and Elaine Morgan on the subject of the noon games, which is not a popular thing for most Georgia fans. Certainly understand that. Randy Hall says, if no turnovers in the first half, we will shut out Arkansas in the first half. Boy, that'd be something to see. Bill Sanders, who I had a chance to see on Friday there at Warren Robins High School, asking about Urban Meyer's future in Jacksonville. Yeah, I have to wonder. I mean, a lot of these guys kind of figured out that, oh, boy, this may not be quite for me. And you wonder if Urban Meyer may have to do the same thing. Jacob O'Neill said, I predicted 62-3 against Vanderbilt, and I was only out by 3 points, which is kind of funny to think about. Calvin Sanders also kind of weighing in with his unhappiness about the noon start. So a lot of folks not too happy about all of that. John Nail says, I can't pick the over-under. Yeah, I really can't. I have been awful. I mean, at this point in time, I think you can fairly well say that I've been awful on Georgia games in particular because we do our picks each week as part of our Go With The Flow broadcast. Like, I'm actually fairly – I mean, some of you are giving me a hard time for getting the A&M thing wrong, but I'm actually fairly happy with my picks across the board, if not for the Georgia game. I mean, it is amazing. I've gotten the Georgia game and over-under, and for those of you that don't really follow it closely, the over-under is the total points scored by both teams. It's the expectation, and you can say they're going to exceed that total or go under that total. That's what an over-under is. It's just kind of a fun way to think about college football. And I have gotten the point spread and the over-under wrong for every Georgia game this year. That's 8 picks I've gotten wrong. And it's not that I'm like consistently under betting Georgia or over betting Georgia. I've been wrong on both sides. I've picked Georgia to cover and they didn't. I've picked Georgia to fail to cover and they did. I've assumed they're going to go under and they didn't. I've called them to go over and they did, and they didn't either. I mean, I've just gotten it wrong on both sides. And if you take away what my erroneous selections in the Georgia games have been, the rest of the picks are actually not looking too bad this year. But it's just absolutely grasping at straws when it comes to these Georgia games, which we all, for the most part, don't care about. But I was already thinking about that in the comment I brought it up. I am a disaster in picking the team that you'd think I know better than anybody else. Chris Branham on Lad McConkey, what a great start to the season he's had. I like what the big dog Brock says over here, or as Paul Heyman would say, Brock, I like what Big Dog Brock says over here on the DawgNation.com homepage. Need the 12th man read out to be loud and proud. Go Dogs. And, boy, you hope you get a chance to see that. Georgia fans really showing up despite the early start. Coach Kirby Smart, or at least a close facsimile thereof, checks in at DawgNation.com to say humility is 1 week away. I need all of you to help us show up and show out. In order for us to be elite, we need our fans to be elite. Go Dogs. So Kirby Smart checking in to say that. Bob Zamblin on the subject of fans saying it will make a big difference. He says, will the UGA fan base show up as Kirby has requested and be elite and mean? My guess is they probably will. BC mentions there's a incorrect schedule at DawgNation.com. BC, I'll have some folks check that out. I think somebody did mention that, but I'll have some folks check that out and see if we can get that changed. Mike Q says, do you think we start as fast this weekend as we did against Vandy? Boy, I hope so, because that'd be quite a statement to be able to make against an Arkansas team that's played pretty well. And I'd say that Georgia does have a real chance to do that. I think it's a great question. Scott Boland says, any guess as Saturday's guest game day picker? I mean, some of y'all may not like this or may not like golf, but, I mean, it'd be perfect timing to bring in Harris English, right? Fresh off UGA winning the USA winning the Ryder Cup and English being on that team. It seems like that would make some sense there. They may go a different direction, and it's not always team-centric it's not always a team-centric guest picker, but it would certainly make some sense to have a guy like Harris English be it. Although they may try to go for someone who has a bit more broad appeal. But for me personally, I'd love for it to be English. All right, we're going to get ready to go for right now. Wayne Hunter wonders if this will be almost a chance for JT Daniels to play a full game after only playing, 10 attempts on Saturday. Yeah, I guess my guess is we'll probably get to see a little bit more of JT Daniels coming up on Saturday. All right, great stuff. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews podcast cool down. Actually, this is their regular cool down. They're the R.S. Andrews cool down. You can find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So find them online at rsandrews.com. You have a great day. I will see you back here tomorrow for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Look forward to talking to you then, everybody.